Um, Hi again to everybody. Thank you for tuning in again. My name is Kirk Benshoff, and I'm the art director over at First Second. You might remember me from such sessions as thumbnailing. So a quick reminder, if you want to see any of the panelists and presentations, you can just hover over the window of the presenter or the presentation and click on the full screen. In the previous session, we talked about the first major step in creating the art, which are the thumbnails. And I had a fantastic conversation with Lisa Brown about how she develops her thumbnails and pencils into her final art. I also paralleled this stage in my introduction with what we do on the First Second side, which is basically kicking off our projects to get everybody on the same page with the creator's vision and just knowing how knowing every project is going to be unique. So up to this point in the process, we're loosely developing the comic so editors can work with the creators on their story. And at this stage, the thumbnails and pencils are purposefully loose, so they're effective enough to communicate the intentions of each panel and page and chapter, yet easy enough to modify should there be any edits needed. And at this stage, we start to see the story materializing. We're getting the visual flow and the pacing of the book. And honestly, we're developing a relationship with the project and seeing the foundation of the graphic novel really starting to take shape. And if it's decided that a section or sections of the story need to be reworked, adjusting thumbnails and sketches are just considerably easier to do. Because once we start the inking and the coloring, any big changes in our story, in essence, is taking a couple steps back. We have to go back to the sketches and rework those panels and then go back up to inks and color. And we also don't want to forget that the inking and the colors in of themselves are art forms that require a lot of thought and time, frankly. Mm-hmm. So because of how important the role of ink and color and lettering is to each other, what I like to do is I like to think about what the final pages are going to look like as early as possible. So when I'm working with my creators, I'd like to see how the lettering is going to look next to the color art. And is the text the right size for the page? How are the bubbles going to be rendered? And how do we want to approach, the color? And are there going to be color palette shifts in the story? What are those shifts going to look like? So at this stage, or typically around this stage, like right at the end of the thumbnails and sketches, I like to work with my creators to create test pages that are representative of the final art of the book as soon as I can get my creator in the headspace for it. It's these test pages that give everyone the most detailed snapshot of the final book. And it's here we can catch seemingly simple edits before they are repeated a few hundred times. My creators can look at the color and decide, is this what they were intending? And seeing these test pages sometimes cascade into new ideas or sometimes into reevaluating old ones. The test pages give us a valuable perspective at an early stage, where the thumbnails and the pencils are a macro view of the entire story. The test pages are a micro view on the final execution of the artwork. And it's this combination of the macro and the micro perspectives that come together to give my creators something a little less to worry about as they move forward. So now in our sort of festival theme, our thumbnails and pencils and our test pages are complete. Everyone's on a unified front with how the book is looking. Now our creators are going to dive into inking. And I'm super, 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 super excited to introduce Kat Leyh for session 4 on inking, author of SNAPDRAGON, a magical realist graphic novel about a young girl who befriends her town's witch and discovers the strange magic within herself. How's it going?
Good.
So, I know you brought some visuals. Did you want to walk us through a little bit of your process, or?
Sure. Yeah, I have here one sample page from Snapdragon. Because I work digitally, I tend to erase the rough pages once I've
Right.
used them. So I don't have a whole lot of examples. So I also included a few processed shots from some Lumberjanes covers that I've done.
That's great.
Book that I work on. So the first image is a rough page from Snapdragon. It's very rough. Like there are maybe 2 panels on there that I could go right to inking with. They still need a little bit of work, but I have the general idea down.
Yeah.
And then the next page is the finished lines. So if you want to can toggle back and forth just to see that one, the rough page, and then the finished lines. And so obviously lot of decisions made.
So when you're working it, so let's take a step back to your pencils. I mean, how are the pencils? What are the roles of the pencils really there for you? Is it really just to get just like a general sense of, this is where I'm going to put the characters, just the basic elements in each scene, or because it's interesting, like your pencils have some of the detail of the bench. But the middle frame, there's very little detail like in the foliage.
Yeah, during this stage especially, I'm trying to figure out expressions that characters are having, or their body language, or the angle that I want the camera to show the character at. I think that's what I figure out a lot in that stage. And then I'll try to do some pretty tight roughs, try to get my anatomy and fabric figured out. And I still like to keep it pretty rough because I try to keep some loose quality to my lines. So yeah, sometimes it depends. Sometimes I don't need to do super tight roughs, especially if I am better at drawing a character or something like that.
And you're working, and so am I understanding you correctly, you're working all in the same file, so you'll do the pencils and then you'll just start layering layers on top of it.
Yeah, I work, sometimes I'll work really, like I'll finish the lines in one panel while I'm still maybe figuring out some roughs in another, just to see how certain things look. I think that's one of the benefits of working digitally, is that I can be a little bit more flexible in the order in which I do things.
Yeah.
If you show the next panel, or the next one, I showed the flat colors, and then the next one after that, I have the final art for that page, just to show start to finish. And then the next few images are from Lumberjanes. So a similar kind of thing where I'm just figuring out like the shape of the characters and some general body language and the layout. And then from there, I'll move on to the lines. So next after that one is, that's a tighter rough. Okay. And then next after that, I think, is lines. Yeah. So
it's interesting though. It's almost like, just like watching these, it's almost like watching the whole thing come into focus. It's like your eyes are very blurred in the beginning, and every step you're kind of like getting more and more detail.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
And this is for a Lumberjanes cover, correct?
Yeah.
So how is the can you speak a little bit to the difference between working on cover art versus interior art for you?
I tend to spend a little bit more time on cover art. I like to keep, like I said, the interior art a little bit looser. I think it helps your eye travel a little quicker when there's not as many details to focus on necessarily. Covers are a little bit more about detail and about like I have the next image after this is flat again, and then I've got some more color added. I'm still figuring out the trees in that one, and I'm figuring out more colors. And then after that, I think is the final art. Yeah, I think that's final. But just like making more color decisions, spending a little bit more time figuring out some details maybe, but I don't treat the interior art and the covers too differently. I usually spend a little bit more time on the covers.
And how has your inking style in general evolved over the years? Are you feeling that are you feeling there's been an evolution, say, from like Birdwitch onto Snapdragon?
That's a good question. My style has certainly changed over the last 10 years or so. I find a lot of inspiration from animation, and I like simplistic shapes and flat colors, and so over the years, I think I've tried to make fewer lines, fewer strokes. Try to keep the line simple, not focus so much on the width of the line. I admire a lot of artists who use that like line width so beautifully, and they do a lot of really create like very small hatches and the really thick lines. I've moved far away from that. I try to keep my line thickness really consistent. Almost like a Sharpie.
But I love that you're drawing this influence from animation, because I feel like just in the past 10 years alone, it's just exploded in terms of style influence. What are some of the things that you're watching that's catching your eye?
I just watched You Over the Wall. It was a Masaki Yuasa movie that was on Netflix about a mermaid. That animator particularly has a wild style that's really cool to see in motion. And just also Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken was a show that he just recently did. So I'm kind of on a Masaki Yuasa kick right now.
That's awesome. Yeah. What are other areas that besides comics and animation that are you're drawing influence from?
Those are definitely the main ones, but certainly photography can be really inspirational. I've got a whole folder on my computer that's just either pictures that I take or pictures that I see. I try to take pictures of interesting buildings or...
Sorry, did you say it's pictures of cake?
No.
Oh, I was like, that's amazing. That would be... I wish you had a folder of cake pictures, but sorry.
I haven't drawn that much cake. Not I need to make a new folder of inspirational photos for cake. I think I said pictures that I take.
Oh,
so
right.
That I take or pictures that I find online that I think are cool.
My headphones are working. Oh, that's awesome. So, with Snapdragon, you really had ownership of everything. You wrote the text, you drew and you colored and you lettered everything. Can you talk a little bit about, the challenges with that, the victories, and everything sort of in between?
Yeah, I like the amount of control that it gives me, and the way that I can, when I'm writing and drawing everything, I can make changes at stages that I otherwise wouldn't be able to make. I think a lot about changes that I would make, for example, to Lumberjanes, because I just write that series. I don't do the art, but I know I would make changes.
Right.
To, like little things mostly.
Yeah.
If I was also drawing it, because there are so many things you realize in the drawing process.
Right.
So I think that's really something that I appreciate about it, and I would like to get better at lettering, because it is more difficult than it seems. It is an underrated skill for sure.
It is.
But I also like being able to make decisions about where my bubbles go, and it makes it easier to leave space for bubbles when you're doing that yourself, because then you're leaving that task for someone else to figure out. Like sometimes I need to scoot a character down a little bit, or make them a little smaller so a bubble fits. Or
so when are you factoring that in? Are you doing that in, thumbnail stage? Are you doing that in sketch stage? Or are you kind of, waiting until the art evolves a little bit to kind of see where you want to put it at that point?
I usually will add in, because I write the dialogue as I'm drawing it.
Oh, okay.
And so during the rough stage, I'll type in where I want the dialogue to go.
Okay.
And then I'll go back later and format it nice and
right.
And so before I even draw my panel lines, I usually have the text that I want sitting where I want it to be, so I have a better idea of how much space I need to leave.
Okay.
For things. So
that helps. Interesting. Yeah. So like when you're writing as you're illustrating, do those ever come to a head? You're kind of like you're like, oh man, I've got to either make this short or illustrate this, or I don't know. Does that ever come to an impasse or anything?
There are times when I'll put in I'll just know that I need to add some dialogue there later. I do that. Okay. They'll just put it in little quotes, and it's like, I need to figure out something funny for this character to say later.
Nice.
That I just need placeholder text so that I know that something's going to go there, and then I leave room for it, but I haven't figured out what the line is yet or something like that. But usually I figure it out as I'm drawing.
That's awesome. That's kind of amazing. So I love Snapdragon. It is absolutely just such a heartwarming story. But it's absolutely incredible world building in there. I mean, how are you getting into the headspace to do the world building for Snapdragon? And I'm really hoping it involves riding a dirt bike around dirt roads and things like that. But
I did learn how to ride a motorcycle while I was writing that book.
Oh my God, that's even the better answer. That's awesome.
Yeah. I don't know. I pull a lot of the way characters act from either myself. It makes it a lot easier, obviously, to write a point of view that you share. But I also try to, reach outside my way of thinking and think about other people and how different people are going to react to a situation differently, and try to think about that when I'm making a character. And it's like, what kind of character is this going to be? Is this going to be a confrontational character, or someone who's more more meek or something? And then go about it that way and try to keep a clear idea of a character's personality.
Yeah.
Working on it. Like a lot of the things from Snapdragon I pulled from just when I was growing up. I grew up in the country and always been fascinated with finding little animal bones and things in the woods. And so.
Well, it's funny. It just reminded me so much of, like parts of my hometown and everything. So it was just like, you really kind of captured the nuances so well.
Oh, nice.
And so I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit. So you did the artwork for Snapdragon in Photoshop on a Cintiq. Has the idea of working in a different medium ever crossed your mind? Saying, you know what, I'm gonna hand ink this. I'm gonna dive into brushes. Has that ever crossed your mind?
I've never worked in a traditional media for comics. When I was in college, I'd never used a tablet or Photoshop or anything before to draw. I was all watercolor, watercolor, pen and ink, and I was really into that, and I enjoyed it, and I still like doing that for fun.
Yeah.
But once I started working digitally, it seemed like a really good way to work fast. And at the time I was thinking I might go into storyboarding, which is, you don't have to be as concerned with, the quality of your line, or you just need to make it fast. Yeah. So computers are great for that. And then after that is when I started thinking about comics. And now I can't imagine doing it traditionally, because I liked being able to I like being able to resize things, and I like being able to do the back button.
Yeah.
I'm fully into doing.
You're fully assimilated into the. That's awesome.
But yeah, I still enjoy traditional media for almost like a hobby, I guess.
I mean, I guess part of that is coming from this idea of like, I mean, where do you see your style going? You know, you're definitely embracing these, you know, the influence from these animations, and you know, you're going more minimalistic with your ink style. You know, where are you? Where can you envision your style going?
You know, hopefully just better, just more of what I'm doing now, but just super successfully.
Yeah.
I don't know. I definitely have room to grow for sure. I need to get better at making my bubbles and lettering, doing all that. If I want to continue doing that for myself, I do need to get better at that. I feel like I'm getting better at color all the time. That's still something that stops me up a lot. And probably my biggest thing that I would love to see myself improve on is backgrounds. Backgrounds are very hard for me.
I mean, well, they're. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, they carry such a significant role in a lot of cases that, you know, it's like a background that's off can be very noticeable.
Oh yeah.
But I can confidently say your backgrounds for Snapdragon are phenomenal. So, you know.
I worked very hard on them.
So, you know, I understand you're part of drawing groups out in Chicago. Is that correct? Or part of drawing group, or maybe not out in Chicago. So, are you doing like kind of comic drawing groups?
There's a cartoonist crit club here that I participate in once in a while. It's on hiatus right now.
Oh, yeah.
Like Sage Kofi, they're one of the folks in there, and then Izzy Rotman is another one, and they're all Chicago cartoonists, which can be really nice. But also, again, because I work digitally, it can be a little harder to share what I'm working on because I have to lug my whole laptop with me.
Right.
And those folks are all more traditional folks, so it's a lot easier for them to have crit clubs and that kind of stuff.
So has that dynamic influenced you in any way in terms of, you know, like being able to showcase it? Like, did you share parts of Snapdragon with them when you were working on it? I
shared part of my current graphic novel that I'm working on, and it was helpful to. I had, I think, 4 pitches that I was working on after Snapdragon for my next project, and I brought those to the Crit Club, and that was really helpful to hear the
feedback and everything.
Yeah, the feedback from that. That's what I like about conventions as well, going and meeting other creators and talking about the projects that we're excited about.
Yeah, so that's awesome.
Good place to hear feedback.
Well, we have some questions from the viewers, and we have. I love this first one is kind of amazing. It's from Juniper, who's 6 years old and a big Lumberjanes fan. Yeah. But she's asking, how do you come up with your characters? And I, you know, and I'll expand on that too. Like, you know, like how are you coming up also with like your character designs, you know,
sure,
as well?
Like I said, I usually, I generally write stories that are character driven. So that usually means I come up with the characters first, and then I figure out what they're going to do kind of secondary to that. And for Snapdragon, I did come up with the character of Jax first. And then I kind of thought more about her character, and I thought about a girl that she could mentor or something. And then what would that personality be like? And what would be an interesting dynamic for them to have? And then I kind of just go from there. And usually it's pretty easy. I always daydream a lot anyway, so I always feel like I'm coming up with characters just naturally. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, you just kind of think about like what would be an interesting character for these people to interact with, or like what would make their personality types, you know, what kind of personality types would be interesting
Right.
to interact, that sort of thing.
And this is kind of like largely like as your imagination's kind of bouncing around, or is this kind of bubbling up, you know, together as you're, you know, on your Cintiq?
I usually just kind of think about it. I just kind of daydream for a long walk without my phone and just kind of think.
Yeah, live with it for a bit.
And story, and then what they look like is when I usually do a lot of doodles. Just think about what would look really interesting visually. Again, Jax was really easy right off the bat for me to come up with, and I wanted Snap to have the big ponytails that I draw her with, and then it just kind of went from there. They were actually pretty well formed right from the beginning, the two of them, and then the character Lou. She took a little longer for me to figure out what her character was gonna be like, but then
that's awesome.
I landed on it.
So we have a question from EJ, well, which you've kind of talked about already, which was, do you prefer traditional or digital inking, and the pros and cons? And you know, I think you definitely covered that one, being able to go back in history and take advantage of the Photoshop. Actually, this one's interesting. Stephanie Lau, she would love to hear about how you manage your files. There's so many pages to keep track of. How do you rename or adjust your files when you decide to insert additional pages partway through the process?
Sure. So I like to be really organized in my files. I mean, for comics pages, it's pretty easy. I just do numbers. If there's a file that I need, like I'll have a blank file that is a 2-page spread that I'll keep at the top of my files by putting an exclamation mark in front of it, because the exclamation mark comes before numbers. So things that I need to keep at the top of my list, I'll put up there. And then I use a Mac, and with Macs, you can right click on a file name, and you have this spread of little different colored dots that you can put next to your file name. And I use those to indicate what I have to write next, what I need to do the lines for next, what I need to finish, what I need to letter. And so I have a system of dots that lets me visually see what I still have to do. And then I have like the yellow dot means that this page takes priority. So I need to focus on this one before I focus on all the other pages, which
I love how visual this is, by the way. You're
very
speaking my jam here. This is like,
oh yeah. I have figured out a system that works for me.
Oh my God.
And then if I need to renumber a page, which happens, I just go through and I just have to rename all the files, which can be tedious, but you know, I can listen to a podcast and just spend some time renaming files.
You got to do it though, because otherwise it'll just nag you if it's not done though.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll put like a B after a letter, just so that I know later on I have to rename all these files and move everything back around.
That's awesome. So I have a couple of questions that I figured I'd throw at you before we wrap up. What has been your creative outlet during quarantine life?
Well, I am still working on everything that I was working on before all of this started. I still have the same deadlines that I had before all of this started. It's been kind of a struggle to continue working creatively during all of this, even though I work from home and my schedule hasn't changed that much, really. But it is still difficult to focus during all of this. So I'm still doing all of that. And now that it's becoming spring, I really value my breaks that I can take. I can ride my bike. That's a safe activity
right
here in Chicago. So I can still get out and do that. And that does wonders for my mental state.
That's great. And when you are working, what is your creative ritual? like when you are here, like when you are working, are you do you have to have music playing? Are you do you have to have a movie on in the background, or are you like the mad coffee drinker when you're working?
Don't really drink coffee. I have a system that works for me where I'll have my morning and I'll eat my breakfast, and then I'll start with writing, because that's the hardest part for me. So I'll usually spend a few hours writing and then take a break and then start drawing. And usually I work best at night. And so I generally will draw from the afternoon just into night and take break for dinner, and then just keep drawing until I get sleepy.
Nice.
And that works for me, because it's really easy for me to enter the more creative, like, flow state at night, which is true for a lot of creative people.
Yeah.
It's a brain thing.
Yeah.
That a lot of people have. There's something about nighttime that makes it easier to enter creative headspaces.
Yeah.
And I love listening to podcasts the most, probably while I'm drawing, not writing. Obviously, I can't listen to anything when I'm writing unless it's
right.
chill music without lyrics.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of podcasts, a lot of fiction podcasts are probably about my favorite to listen to.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been absolutely incredible, absolutely wonderful. And, was there anything you wanted to kind of say to our audience or everything before we go?
Just, everybody, take care of yourselves. Be gentle with yourselves. I know a lot of people are trying to be as productive as they were before, and there's a lot of pressure suddenly to take on new hobbies, and it's enough just to focus on your mental health and you can take breaks, just be good to yourself, be patient with other people, support local business. I mean,
yeah. Amen to that one.
Yeah. Stay home, stay safe.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. This was absolutely wonderful.